Very good morning, everybody. It is beautiful to be here back at Stanborough Park Church. You need to know that I call this church my home church, despite spending pretty much majority of my Sabbaths away from this church. But I can tell you that my family worships here, and we love it. And for all of this, we want to thank you for your ministry. Also, a big thank you to Pat and Audrey and all the team who put this service together. It is so beautiful to be part of a service like this. Once, as I was walking on the top of the mountains in Montenegro, a small, beautiful country at the coast of Adriatic coast, I was walking with my friend who explained something to me. He said, Dejan, as you're walking on top of these mountains, I need to tell you that me and my family, during the Second World War, when invading forces came across the Adriatic Sea, ran from our village, and we lived here. As I looked around, I can tell you this. I saw the clouds. The clouds were actually beneath us. I was wondering how all this story took place. I said, tell me a little bit more. And he explained this to me. He said, we ran higher and higher and higher. And then we found caves and we found places where to sleep. In the morning, we used to search for the little puddles of water to drink water. And as he was telling me this story and I was imagining this situation, he finished this story with a sentence that really shocked me. He said this to me, and while we were here, all this time, we lived without salt. As I was standing on top of this mountain, if you know me, you know my mind goes in some very strange places. I was thinking, is this how you end up the story? Are you saying this to me? I couldn't say this loud, that the most important part of this flight from your village to the mountains, it would not be, for example, sleeping on the rocks or in the caves or searching for the water or searching for the food. The most important end for you, it seems to me, is that you did not have enough seasoning in your life. And then, as we came down the mountain, I couldn't stop thinking about this. And today, when I was asked to speak for this service, I realized why I got this story. Because I realized that salt is such an important part of so many different cultures, so many different countries, and I did a very quick search online to find out that the countries which have a very close connection with the salt, for example, Romania, Germany, Poland, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Iran, Bulgaria, United Kingdom, Serbia, Russia, and many others. You see, my friends, in Romania, if you come to their home, they would offer you bread and salt to welcome you to their home. If you come to Germany, they would bring salt to the wedding to say and send a message that alliance between those who are getting married should be strong. In countries like Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and the Lithuanian, you bring salt when you move, when your friends move into a new house. When it comes to United Kingdom, you'll be surprised that in northern parts of the country, the tradition was that on the first day of a new year, you would bring bread, salt, and bag of coal, which is very appropriate, I think. On the other hand, if you come to Serbia or you come to home of my wife and myself, the tradition is very similar. We would usually offer the bread and the salt. In other words, the bread stands that you're welcome, and salt says that we will guarantee your safety. If you come and I offer you only bread, you know what's going to happen. We welcome you, but we cannot guarantee the safety for sure. Or if you don't bring bread nor salt, that means I probably ate it or forgot it for sure. But this tradition moved from country to country all the way to space. As the Russians joined the International Space Station, they brought the salt and bread to the International Space Station to bring this beautiful tradition there. My friends, well, what I want to say is that so many of us love salt. As a child, I loved salt so much, I can tell you this, that for every single meal, I would ask somebody to give me a little bit of salt. You know the salt is not good for children. So all we do is we try to avoid this situation. But I had a grandmother who I was a favorite grandchild. I said, can I have some salt, please? And she would bring the glass pot, and she would dip her 3 fingers, and she would sprinkle across my food. I felt so good. But then I tasted the food, and the food tasted exactly the same. I said, excuse me, can I have a little bit more salt, grandmother? And she said, no problem at all. She dipped the 3 fingers again, and she sprinkled across my meal. I started eating, and I realized it is exactly the same taste as 2 sprinkles ago. I was thinking this salt is not working. Something is wrong with this salt. And as I said, Grandmother, can I have more salt, please? Something crossed my mind which I could never think of. I thought, what if salt is working, but my grandmother is cheating? So she dipped her 3 fingers again, and she sprinkled the salt over the food. Well, at least that's what I thought. And then I quickly grabbed her hand, and I licked her 3 fingers to find out she was cheating. My household started laughing, but I found nothing to laugh about. Not at all. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, we find as Jesus is saying, it's like, you are the salt of this world. Did you know, my friends, that in the times of Jesus, as he was walking on this planet and the Roman Empire was occupying those areas, did you know the Roman soldiers used to be paid in salt, some scholars would say? My friends, I was surprised to find out when I read this text that this was the beginning of the rise of the phrase, "Word His salt." And then as I was digging deep, I found out that the word we love so much, which is salary, not the vegetable, but the money, the wage, comes from the Latin word salarium, which comes from the base word of sal, which is nothing else than a salt itself. Other scholars are saying the Roman soldiers were not paid in salt, but what they're saying is that they used to have the salt actually part of their wage. In other words, they would get the money, but then automatically they would get a small bag of salt. You see, my friends, Jesus called and he said, you are the salt of the world. You see, my friends, Jesus in this text compares the salt directly to his disciples. People like you and me, people who claim to be believers of Jesus Christ and his followers. And in this very much comparison, Jesus also gives us 2 very important roles in this world. And the role number 1 is preservation, and role number 2 is improvement. Well, if we're talking about preservation, I can tell you for sure, and maybe even in your culture today, there are so many meals which use a lot of salt to preserve it. For example, meat or fish, even in this country, during Napoleonic Wars, which only lasted just 200 years, the staple food for the sailors on the ships was meat, which was preserved by the salt, because that was the only way for them to have the food for these long periods of time on sea. Christians are called to be the salt with 2 purposes. One is to preserve the values, and also to improve. You see, my friends, most salt in those days was produced from salt mashes. You would be surprised, not by drying the water out of the sea and getting the salt, but from salt mashes. The problem about them was that actually they were very easily contaminated. If somebody would touch the edge, some things would come in, the salt would lose its taste, sometimes become bitter and became unusable. And the text which we read this morning, it simply says that if the salt loses its saltiness, it is only good to be thrown on the floor to be trampled. My friends, this is one of the Bible texts which is posing the question, but actually the scholars and the writers are saying the question which is posed, that what shall we do with the salt, it is meant to be unanswered. Because in those days, it was almost impossible to return the saltiness back to the salt. The question is there for you and for me to be reminded on daily basis as a Christians of what will happen if we lose the purpose, if we lose what God wanted us to be. I don't know about you, my friends, but sometimes I do struggle with the purpose. I found this text. It comes from nobody else than Richard Dawkins, one of the leading atheists, who actually made his long life mission to remove the Christianity from the society. In fact, he even called for more radical ways of banishing it and taking it away. But it seems to me, even Richard Dawkins, the leading atheist, actually realized that Christians have something that others don't. And that is the purpose. The purpose which is to preserve. What Richard Dawkins said is here, he says, for the Times, he wrote, it would be a terrible idea to remove Christianity from the society because it would give people license to do really bad things. Richard Dawkins realized that our purpose as somebody who needs to preserve the values of our society and Christianity is very important. It seems to me that Richard Dawkins read the article by Douglas Murray, who actually said this. He says that during the Soviet Union, in a country where God did not exist and people were forced not to believe in anything, and then they killed 3 million of their own citizens, he says, it seems to me the lacking thing was the preserving influence of Christianity. He said simply this, after that, he says, if there was God and there was a Christian presence in the society, maybe this would not take the place. Richard Dawkins continues after this, and he simply says, we need this preserving influence of Christianity, despite him continuing saying, it doesn't make me believe in God, but it certainly allows me to see the value of Christianity in the society today. My friends, it is sometimes so sad that atheists have to remind Christians of what their purpose is. And the purpose is simple. It is to preserve and to improve. Now you're wondering, how can I improve anything? How can I actually make a difference in this world? And today, the children are reminding us of this. The children are reminding us they are the salt, despite sometimes that can be painful. I know some parents who spend all Sabbath school persuading their children to give the toy away. To be the difference in this world, to be the salt, it has a price. And they are teaching us lesson this morning through this toy service. Because today we live in a world where not only children don't have toys, but sometimes it seems to me they don't even have food to put on their tables. We live in a world where people still sleep on the streets of this beautiful country, and I'm sure we can make some improvement there for them. We live in a world which certainly needs a few more trees, and I'm sure in your garden there is a place for 1, 2, or 3 maybe. My friends, I believe that we can be the salt to the world and we can make the difference. We live in a world next to the capital city which is full of lonely people. I believe that we can make a difference. And now you don't even have to go to London. You can just look in this room, and I can tell you there are some people here who could do with a little bit more friends, a little bit more visits, a little bit more closer people in their life. My friends, I believe we can make a difference. So today, if you wonder how you can be improving influence, the example after example can go on, and I can tell you that you can. You can make that difference. We survived, I would say, and I'm sure you would agree with me, quite a turbulent week for sure. Maybe quite a turbulent few months or few years. And I was thinking, how would I define the taste of the country I live today in? Maybe you would agree with me that the taste of this country at the moment might be just sweet and sour right now. But my friends, please never forget that God has called you and called me to be the season and the change of this season. At the same time, my friends, God has called us to be nothing else than a salt to this world.